Hey everyone, we're going to get started. This is the Baltimore City Council's Ways and Means Committee. I'm Eric Costello, councilman from the 11th District, chair of the committee. If all of my colleagues could please turn on your video. I'm joined today by Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee. Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee. Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. Staff to the committee is Marguerite Curran. We are also joined by Nina Themelis and Natasha Mehew on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott. We're joined by Matt Stegman and Nikki Thompson on behalf of Council President Nick Mosby. And we are joined by Casey Kelleher on behalf of Comptroller Bill Henry. Second. First bill up. Is going to be Council Bill 21-0091, sale of property, block 6997, lot 002. First up, I have Department of Planning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We have no objection. Recommend passage.
Thank you, Mr. Tizo. Department of Law, approved for form and legal sufficiency.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Nina Themelis with the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. I don't see a representative on from the Law Department, but they would stand by their bill report and approve bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Thank you, Ms. Themelis. Department of Transportation, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Chair, this is Liam Davis with Baltimore City DOT. We stand by our bill report, which is no objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Parking Authority of Baltimore City.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Arco Center from Parking Authority, and we have no objections.
Thank you, sir. Department of Housing and Community Development, Ms. Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Stephanie Murdoch, Legislative Liaison for DHCD. We stand by our bill report in support of this legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Murdoch. Department of Finance, Ms. James.
Good morning, Mara James, the Department of Finance. We stand by our report. We do not oppose this legislation.
Thank you. Department of Real Estate, Ms. Kelleher.
Good morning, Casey Kelleher on behalf of the Department of Real Estate and the Office of the Comptroller. This bill was introduced at our request by the administration, so thank you. We want to say that we stand by our report and look forward to giving any other details as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to turn it over for very, very brief remarks because we have a busy schedule today to Ms. Guthrie on behalf of the Maryland Port Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No major comments here, just the MPA is looking to acquire this property to expand cargo opportunities for the Port of Baltimore.
Well, I'm certainly more than happy to do anything I can for the Port of Baltimore, considering it's responsible for 1/3 of the economic output of the entire region. Colleagues, are there any questions? Is there a motion? Pardon me, we've been joined by Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee. Is there a motion to move the bill favorably?
Move the bill favorable.
Motion by Dorsey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Burnett. Costello is a yes. Burnett?
Yes.
Schleifer?
Yes.
Dorsey?
Yes.
Dorsey? Thank you. McCray?
Yes.
Thank you. This bill passes 5-0 with 2 absences, Council Vice President Middleton and Councilman Stokes. We may come back to reconsider to get their votes on the record. Thank you all for that. Now we will go to second here. Council Bill 21-0112, Charter Amendment Supplementary Criminal Apprehension and Conviction Fund. Councilman Schleifer, before I turn it over to you for brief introductory remarks, my understanding from talking with Ms. Wurzberger from the police department is, I want to say it's Major Herzog. Please forgive me if I.
Close, Lieutenant Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel, please accept my sincere apologies. Always been a big fan of yours. So not surprised that you snuck up there and were promoted while I wasn't looking. Councilman Schleifer, just as an FYI, Lieutenant Colonel Herzog has a hard stop for a critical meeting at 10:30 p.m. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to you for brief introductory remarks. I want to give Colonel Herzog an opportunity to present, and then I want to shift to allow the council to ask him questions. And then at 10:30, we will shift to the other agencies to do their reports. Are you okay with that, Councilman?
Fine by
Thank
me.
you. Councilman Schleifer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. In the beginning of May of this year, a tourist who was visiting my district from out of the country was murdered in a robbery gone wrong while walking into his aunt and uncle's house. A crime like this, where there's no motive and there's no connections to anybody else in the country, it was his first time visiting, would normally be almost impossible to solve. A few days later, a reward was offered of $30,000 for any information that would lead to the arrest and conviction of the suspects. When that reward flyer went out, the phones rang off the hook. People were calling my office, people were calling the number on the flyer, people were calling the police department and sharing anything that they knew. If somebody was driving down the street and saw a car approximately that time, they were calling it in. And so within a month later, these suspects were in custody. And it couldn't have been done without the tips that came forward, as well as the excellent detective work that the homicide detectives worked around the clock on solving this and all these other cases in the city. Now, what we do know is detectives are spread very thin. And when tips come forward, it helps them solve these crimes a lot quicker, which helps bring closure to the families and communities of these victims. In addition to that, if detectives can solve their crimes and their caseload quicker, that also helps reduce, the overtime that they have to spend in solving these crimes. And what I found in this situation, after that case got resolved so quickly, I started receiving calls from people all across the city whose family members were murdered on the streets of Baltimore. And they said, how do we get a reward like that? How do we get the same attention on our cases? And what I realized very quickly was that, you have a case, you can have a similar case in West Baltimore, and that reward will only be $2,000. So, this bill is all about creating equity across the board where the same reward would be offered in West Baltimore as it would be in Northwest Baltimore. And all families of these homicide victims deserve closure. The communities deserve closure. And those who are committing these crimes need to be held accountable. And so creating this fund on the city charter will enable foundations, businesses, and other partners to contribute towards a non-lapsing fund that would go and offer this supplement reward across the board on all events that take place. Now, just as a point of clarity, this bill is just to create the fund. If this were to pass, there would need to be a complementary bill, which would then dictate how the fund will work. Now, I know I sent you over, Mr. Chair, a letter of support for Metro Crime Stoppers that sent it in this morning. And in their letter, they state how Prince George's County has a $25,000 reward for all of these homicides that they have. And what we know is that $2,000 is not really as attractive as $10,000 or $25,000 would be. And so we can't put a price on the countless lives that are being lost. And this is a solution that will instantly get people who know something to come forward anonymously and give the tips over for the detectives to be able to solve these cases. So thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will defer to Lieutenant Colonel Herzog for the time being, and I'm happy to answer questions after he's done.
Councilman, thank you for the explanation, all the hard work that's gone into this and your leadership on this critical issue. Lieutenant Colonel Herzog, the floor is yours, sir.
So let me just jump in there right quick before Lieutenant Colonel Herzog. For the record, Michelle Wurzberger, Director of Government Affairs for the Baltimore Police Department. I am joined today by Lieutenant Colonel Jack Herzog and Colonel Rich Worley and Shannon Conway. We did submit a bill report, and we stand by that. I do want to make a couple of notes, though. I want to say very sincerely thank you to Chairman Yitzi Schleifer. He has always been a partner to the Baltimore Police Department and is always looking for creative ways to help in the crime fight. And that is absolutely something that we appreciate. We appreciate your partnership in all of those endeavors. So with that, I will open the floor to anyone who may have any operational questions regarding how we interact with Metro Crime Stoppers, and Lieutenant Colonel Herzog will be able to answer that.
Lieutenant Colonel.
Yeah, good morning. As Michelle said, I'm certainly here to answer any questions. I think that this is definitely a good thing as far as increasing that communication and collaboration with the community and giving the neighborhoods and community members the available resources and outlets to share information and tips that they have about crime. Obviously, it's no secret about that there's not a lot of cases where we're getting people coming forward altogether. So I think providing more outlets is always a good thing. Councilman Schleifer, I know you said we always, that if this were to pass, we would have to come back to talk about the mechanics, which is an area where I do have some questions. But I think overall, this is, this is something that I think the spirit of it is absolutely tremendous. And as Michelle said, I echo what she said with, coming up with an innovative and creative kind of solution to something for us to increase some of the barriers or to improve some of the barriers that we've had in the past with getting information about cases. So I'll pause there, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Councilman Burnett, can you please chair for a few minutes and manage questions? Thank you, Councilman.
Yep. Okay. I see Councilman Schleifer.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you very much, Michelle and Lieutenant Colonel, for the introduction. I just want to just point out, as far as the mechanics, that certainly everything we hear at this hearing and future hearings on this topic will help go into crafting that. And I look forward to working with everybody, all partners, the community, the police department, the council, everybody coming together to figure out the proper mechanics. I'll just tell you, on the basic surface level, I view this as a tremendous opportunity to provide the most equitable program in the entire city. And so very point and simple, we know that there's certain areas across the city that have the highest levels of shootings and homicides, that are plagued with the most crime. And unfortunately, those are also communities that have a lot of lack a lot of basic resources that they need. And so by doing this, this will give them the opportunity to have that level playing field, that every single murder in the city has the same shot of being solved. And we see it across the board when there's an incident in one neighborhood versus the next. We do see some inequities on media attention and other things that go into that. And and what I've taught and how I was raised is that if you save a life, it's as if you saved an entire world. And that's every life. It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter where they come from. And so, I really see this as a lifesaver and a way to prevent, and actually, I think will have the greatest impact on areas that have the highest crime. And in my area, that murder that took place, excuse me, was a couple blocks from my house. That's a very rare incident. We hadn't had an incident like that I think since I was born, or before I was born. And so, this is something that really will have a citywide impact and will help those families who are still struggling. And we know, and your detectives do an excellent job. But we know no matter what they do right now, there's still a lot of cases that go unsolved. And you know, as much as we'd like the clearance rates to go up, every case that's not clear, that's not solved, that's a family that's still waiting by the phone to get information, to know, you know, and get some of that closure. And so this program I view as an opportunity to really go back and really pin this onto, you know, previous events that have taken place, also to help bring that closure to those families and really set the stage in Baltimore that we care about every single life that's lost on the streets.
No, Councilman, and I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, everything that you just said, you know, I'm definitely in support of. Would love to partner with you and work with you, you know, on this. I think that there is a lot of, you know, potential. One thing that we do know, just through our CGIC program in the Western, and us, you know, kind of marketing Metro Crime Stoppers and some of our other partners more in ways to submit tips, is that we have seen an increase in tips this year by doing that, compared to last year. So I think there's a ton of opportunity here for us to be able to not only improve public safety, but that, you know, that communication and collaboration with the community, and really just, you know, giving, you know, as I said before, giving people that outlet to provide information about cases that they have knowledge about. So I really do look forward to hopefully working with you, you know, partner with, you know, with you on this. It's something I'm, you know, I feel very strongly about. And as you're, you know, you're also well aware, this is something that we have baked into every investigation in our criminal investigation division and our district DDUs, that this is it's a primary focus for every case, that we have to get those flyers out, make sure that it's marketed properly, so that we can try to at least get that information about cases. So I think this is, you know, again, something I think we can definitely partner on, and I feel strongly about. Look forward to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I also, one of the things I learned while being out there when these flyers were being distributed, heard from a lot of community members that they didn't realize that you could actually provide these tips anonymously. You know, people are obviously concerned about coming forward and putting their name on it, but you could actually receive these rewards without ever giving over your name or your information. You're given a code when you call in, and you can check back on that reference number to see if your tip helped solve that case. And so people don't realize that. And I think, you know, even legislation like this will bring attention that's needed to this topic, that that these cases that you could, if you know something, you can call it in anonymously, receive the reward money, and not have to show up at court and testify or do anything. You simply can just relay the information to the detectives and have them clear the case that way.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So, I mean, just that information alone pays dividends for us. You know, making sure that the public is aware of that. You're going to see some things in the very near future, you know, from our department, as far as some signage in some of the business establishments for some of the pilots that we're doing. We've have included QR codes so people can scan them with their cell phone, and it takes them right to the outlets that are available to them to be able to submit tips anonymously, and also those instructions to do that. So a lot of really exciting things. I think you and I are kind of on the same wavelength with this. This is something, as I said, I feel strongly about. So I think, you know, there's a lot of progress that can be made here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Marguerite, real quick, can you please elevate Councilman Stokes? And also, please keep an eye out. Council Vice President Middleton was having some technical difficulties, but she is going to be logging in soon. So please keep an eye out for her. Back to you, Chairman Brunette.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Councilmember McCray?
Chair Burnett, I have several questions. We're talking about a charter amendment and we're saying, hey, we're going to talk about or work together on the mechanics. When are we going to, okay, so I'll say this, what are the mechanics of this bill? How are we going to be determining who gets certain awards? Who will be determining who's going to get the amount of the rewards? Do we have those answers right now, or is that something that the BPD is going to provide, or are we going to talk about that later in the hearing?
So, if I may, Mr. Chair,
go for it, Councilman Slater.
Chairwoman McCray, you know, with the different funds, I think this was the first fund we're discussing this term. Is that correct, Chairman Burnett? Your campaign finance one was last term, right?
Yeah, we did it in 3 parts, or 2 parts so far. if you want to jump in on your plans, yeah.
Yeah, so that was the most recent fund that was set up. Chair Burnett proposed and passed a fund on the city charter for publicly financed campaigns. And so, like you mentioned, there's a few parts to it. So the first thing you have to do is actually create a fund. Once the fund, passes and you have a fund, then you have to have complementary legislation to dictate how it operates and where the money goes and the funding across the board. So that's really the more complex piece of legislation. This is simply just the creation of the fund. Does that answer your question?
No. So maybe I should direct this to the police. Let me go into a different question, but thank you, Councilman Schleifer, and thank you, Chair Burnett. For BPD, you stated, or Councilman Schleifer stated, that we did not know, a lot of people may not have knew that you could report things anonymously. I want to make sure that there's a need for a fund, especially before we go and put through a charter, because once we put through a charter amendment, typically, most people are going to vote for it. So how are we, or how is the BPD actively disseminating information that you can collect rewards, even if it's as little as $2,000, that you can collect a reward or put information in anonymously and still have access to getting money from submitting a tip? How are we promoting that throughout the community?
So I can take that. So that's so we promote that on all of our Metro Crime Stoppers flyers. So after every single incident, those flyers are disseminated throughout the community, and that information is made readily available on that flyer. We also do it through our public information officer, through all of our social media outlets, and then you also will hear Commissioner Harrison and some of our other executive staff always referring to that 1-866-7 lockup number for Metro Crime Stoppers, and putting it out there that we can, or that citizens can report information anonymously. So we do that through those means, as well as our district community meetings, and so that information is also pushed out directly to the community members at those meetings. But primarily, it is through those posters that are handed out for every single incident that occurs, violent crime incident.
I'm going to stop there. Thank you, Chair Burnett.
Thank you, Councilmember McCray. And actually, you asked the question that I was going to ask around process. And maybe I missed it, Lieutenant Colonel, but as a follow-up to Councilmember McCray's line of questioning, and again, apologies if I missed it, but how does the department currently determine the amounts? I guess for any given case, is there a certain level of high profile or impact or severity that determines whether it is, or is it just a flat amount?
No, so all of that is determined through Metro Crime Stoppers. I will say, typically when we have violent gun crimes, so we're talking non-fatal shootings and homicides, it typically is around $4,000 for starters. As Michelle said in the opening, Metro Crime Stoppers is funded fully on donations. So a lot of times when there are high-profile incidents, private donors will reach out, completely separate of BPD, that will reach out to Metro Crime Stoppers to see how they can put up some more reward money for a particular case that they could donate their money towards. But typically, for a lot of the cases that that you hear about in the media, they're about $4,000 for homicides and shootings. For robberies, around $2,000. But those numbers are always determined by Metro Crime Stoppers. Now, as far as just to elaborate on how much money somebody is actually rewarded, after a case, after we make an arrest, if the information that is provided by that citizen who supplied that information, if it leads to an arrest, a BPD detective or officer will do a write-up, and that will be submitted to Metro Crime Stoppers through their portal. They'll review that, and then really based on the involvement, the quality of the information, and how much that information helped that detective solve that case, is how they'll ultimately determine how much that citizen will receive. So it's not guaranteed that they're going to get $4,000 just because they provided a tip, but that might be the cap on what on that particular case at that time.
Got it. And as a follow-up on that, because I know your time is limited, do you, and maybe you don't have this on hand, but would you all be able to provide the committee how many cases were solved through this method? I guess like what's the success rate of tips coming in through Metro Crime Stoppers that led to an arrest in, I'd say, the last few years? I'm sure you can give an anecdote, but I don't expect you to have that on hand.
Yeah, so what I can tell you, right? So I was speaking to this a little bit earlier. This is to the overall global tips. So in 2020, our numbers were kind of low. In 2021, when we started really marketing Metro Crime Stoppers and how to submit a tip, we started that on March 10th of this year. And so, kind of anecdotally, and I can supply you the actual raw numbers on this, but we saw a 43% increase in the amount of tips received after marketing that. So I think that kind of speaks to the importance of this, overall as a process. And then Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe in 2020, there were 21 total rewards that were authorized for payment. And so
That's correct.
Yeah, 21 that were authorized for payment, and that's based on the review from Metro Crime Stoppers of the board, based on their assessment of what our detectives provided. There's also a lot of instances where somebody will supply information, and there's no way for us to even contact them back. I mean, it's completely anonymous. There are some ways, if the person wants, that we can communicate with them virtually. But sometimes people just simply supply information because they want to, not because they want to receive an award. And we get those tips as well. We do receive them as well.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions from committee members?
I don't think I have any questions for the Lieutenant Colonel, but perhaps otherwise.
Okay.
When we get there.
You got the floor, Councilman Dorsey.
Well, Mr. Chair, I think we were just hearing from the Lieutenant Colonel because he was on time crunch. I don't think we've heard the rest of the agency reports yet.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in.
Back. There we go.
All right, Councilman Burnett, thank you as always for steering the ship. So nothing else for Lieutenant Colonel Herzog? All right, sir, you are excused. Thank you very much. Michelle, I'm going to ask that you stay on for the duration of the hearing in case there's subsequent follow-up for PPD, please and thank you. Let's jump over to the Department of Finance. And I'm going to ask for more than my customary, yes, we stand by our bill report for both finance and law.
Hi, good morning. This is Bob Sanamy, representing the Department of Finance. Wanted to provide a couple of comments on this bill. First, we do oppose this bill, and wanted to clarify the reason for that opposition is because of the mechanics, some of the discussion we just heard here. We do not think a separate fund is necessary in this case. We think there are vehicles to do that within the existing law. So just as background, there is $200,000 budgeted in the city's budget in fiscal 22 as a contribution to Metro Crime Stoppers. And as you heard earlier, since that is a separate, nonprofit entity, it does take donations directly, if there's news about a certain case like the one we're discussing here. So the city does make a small contribution to Metro Crime Stoppers. Metro Crime Stoppers serves not just Baltimore City, but some of the surrounding counties as well. And there is the vehicle for folks to make direct donations to Metro Crime Stoppers for certain cases. So based on those facts, we don't think that a separate fund is necessary here. And it seems like it would take longer to go through, make a donation to a fund and then appropriate the money and then have the money available. The cleaner, much quicker process is if there are folks that would like to make donations, that they make them directly to Metro Crime Stoppers. We have this money budgeted, like I said, in fiscal 22. It does come up sometimes in the budget process whether we should contribute more or whether it's the best vehicle for assisting with the crime fight. So that's something we do discuss each year, but we've settled on the amount of a contribution of $200,000, which per the police department's earlier comments, allows them to set a target somewhere in the range of $4,000 for shootings or homicides. So again, based on that, we think the program is working as planned. We appreciate the sentiment here for Councilman Schleifer for what he's trying to achieve, but we don't think that the creation of a separate fund is necessary. And based on that, we oppose the legislation.
Thank you, Bob. And I'm going to ask you to stick around. I want to get Law Department on the record just with their report, and then we'll open it up for questions for both Law and Finance. I'll be going to Councilman Schleifer first, of course. Department of Law, who do we have?
Hi, Elena DePietra from the Law Department. Good morning, everyone, members of the committee, Mr. Chair. So the Law Department opposes this legislation as well. Similar to Finance's comments, we don't oppose the concept of this. In fact, we don't have a problem with it being in the charter, but only to the extent that it is creation of the fund and what the fund is for. But the problem comes for us with the designation of the third funding source, which is proceeds from fines, fees, surcharges, and other revenues dedicated by the fund to the ordinance. There's only so much you can do in a charter amendment, and when it goes beyond that, it starts to become legislative in nature, and that's a limitation in the Constitution of Maryland, which local jurisdictions cannot go beyond. So when you want to figure out whether it's charter material or legislative material, you look at the the degree of discretion that is maintained by the council and the control and area over the area which they're trying to control. In this case, when you start mandating that certain funds go into a specific fund into a fund for a specific purpose, then you start getting into limiting the discretion of the city council with respect to their authority, and that is something that we can't allow. And the case law does support that when it says that that is goes over the boundaries of the nature of a charter amendment as opposed to legislating in the charter. And the real issue here is that because this is a charter amendment, it's the people actually legislating by charter amendment, which is something that is not allowed by our Constitution, because the Constitution vests the entire legislative authority in the city council, not in the electorate. In addition, the final point I would make is this also would sort of wreak havoc on our budget system, because the way how broadly it's worded, it says proceeds from fines, et cetera, dedicated by ordinance. So that leaves it open to any existing or future fine, fee, or surcharge that is on the books in the city. And those, you can imagine what would happen if, mid fiscal year, somebody, a council person introduces a bill that dedicates, fines from some existing program that have already been appropriated under the ordinance of estimates to this fund, and it would just wreak havoc. And then in addition, a lot of the fees that you see for our administrative programs are only enough to fund the program itself. So that's required by law as well. So if we go tapping those funds to be diverted to this fund, then you have a program that's not able to function because its funding has been diverted to another purpose midstream potentially. So that's why the Law Department is opposed to this bill. We feel that if that was stricken from the bill, that third funding option, then we could support the charter amendment.
Thank you. Elena, that concludes your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer, take it away.
Thank you very much, Elena. And I read over the report, and as soon as I was done reading it, I immediately sent an email over to Legislative Reference, and they made an amendment amending all the concerns you have, removing that one. I just sent it over to Chairman Costello, and so it is my full intention to remove number 3 and to address the concerns that the Law Department has.
If that's the case, then the Law Department can approve it for formal legal sufficiency. Then.
Okay, thank you very much. And the chairman, if you'll indulge me, can I also just make a comment to the finance department?
As many questions and comments as you want. The floor is yours, Councilman. Real quick, the amendment that you had drafted, do you have that?
I emailed it to you.
Okay, sorry. I'm working
Yeah,
through
and
it.
I want to also send it, Elena, to you just to make sure that it fully addresses your concern.
That was
And if
going
it
to be my
doesn't,
next question. Thank you very much.
yes,
Yep, and
absolutely.
Elena, there's no, and Councilman, there's no rush on that because we're not voting it out today. So if it's all right, we will hold off on consideration of the amendment just so that we can make sure that it addresses law's concerns. Floor is yours,
Sure.
Councilman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just sent it over to you. So if there's any changes, please send it back to me. And then I guess to finance, I guess one would assume that finance would oppose. I actually looked back at some of the previous funds that were created on city charter in modern day history, and finance has been very consistent on opposing all of those funds, which I completely understand the sentiments. I do want to make a point. I'm glad to hear there's money in the budget for Crime Stoppers. A couple points to that. Number one, Crime Stoppers has shared with me that in the past there has been money that has supposed to have been allocated to them as a contribution, like the city has done for many other nonprofits. And unfortunately, there's always been an issue, and the money has not been coming over like from previous mayors. And so I'm glad to see that this mayor is committed to this and is pledging money, and hopefully we'll see to it that that money goes through. I think as Lieutenant Colonel, or maybe Bob had said, that Metro Crime Stoppers operates across the entire state. And so when you contribute money to a nonprofit, and it's not just Metro Crime Stoppers, it's all these, we as a city give funding to a lot of different nonprofits, and a lot of those nonprofits operate, not just in Baltimore City, the larger ones operate across the entire state. And allocating money to them through those sources, those are sometimes unrestricted funds, and it's hard to be able to determine that all that would be spent in Baltimore City. The intention of this fund is to supplement, not to replace, but to only supplement the funds for incidents in Baltimore City. One that by legislation we would dictate how that money is spent. And I think the most important point on that, and the biggest difference with us having a fund that is in city charter and that we legislate, the terms of it, is that it is equal across the board, and that we don't have cases where, with Crime Stoppers, they do an excellent job. Some rewards are 2,000, some are 4,000, some are 10,000, some are 30,000, some are 100,000, and so we need to be able to set the standard that across the board, every single shooting, homicide in the city is getting the exact same reward, and this fund would enable us to do that. So I just wanted to make those points.
Thank you, Councilman. Did you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
Mr.
Okay,
Chair,
I think
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Stokes. Yep. You got the
Yeah,
floor.
I'm sorry, I was on another call. I think y'all voted on the bill and I kind of missed it. Can we go back? Is that possible for this hearing?
Yes, Councilman, once we conclude this hearing, we're gonna make a motion, we'll have a motion to reconsider and we'll go back and revote. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna run through council members to see if there's any questions for finance or law or any comments. Start in the order you appear on the screen. Councilwoman McCray.
Bob, I think the last sentence within your report was that we already have 2 programs, and I think that you already touched on it. I may have missed it. Can you go back and just walk us through again, what are the 2 programs? I think one that you're referencing obviously is the Metro Crime Stoppers. What is the other program that you're referring to? I think that's the last sentence within your report.
So they're part of the same, but there's a general contribution to the Metro Crime Stoppers program that is in the budget. And then there's also, as part of the Monzi budget, they have an agreement with MCS for illegal gun tips and homicide hotline. So same kind of idea where If there are, cases where we need help, we kind of work in collaboration with Metro Crime Stoppers to make sure that those cases are, are highlighted and get the attention that they deserve. But it's really one and the same. It's us making a contribution to Metro Crime Stoppers and working with them on particular cases.
Got it. Thank you. I don't have a follow-up for that question. Michelle, I think this question may be for the police department, or it may be also maybe for the sponsor, Chairman Slifer, if you have this information. I want to know if conviction funds in similar municipalities have proven to be actually effective in increasing the clearance rate. I know in this particular case that obviously Councilman Schleifer is referencing, there were folks who made a lot of tips for it, but across the board or within other similar municipalities who have this set up, has it been shown over time to actually increase the clearance rates?
Councilwoman, I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I could probably do a bit of research, but off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm sorry.
If you could do some research and just furnish it to the committee, I would definitely appreciate it. And Councilman Schleifer, if you have anything to add, or if you have any research that you did on your own, if you could just make sure that that's provided to the committee as well.
Sure. Yeah, I did research on it, and you can find it. There's a whole bunch of information that I found, and I'm happy to forward you some of the stuff. One of the key things that I've found and I discovered while searching for it is that it is really just the speed in which cases are being cleared and how many additional ones are cleared based on the tips. So if we just remove tips out of the equation altogether, then the cases that are solved with tips wouldn't happen. And then the question then really remains, I don't know if there hasn't really been an official study that says a specific dollar amount what speaks to people. However, what I've heard across the board in talking to law enforcement people in multiple jurisdictions is that when you get into that double digits, like $10,000 or above, they said it really sets a whole different tone. When you see a $1,000 reward or a $2,000 reward, it's kind of like an example somebody gave me was you walk into a 7-Eleven and you want to buy a scratch off. You see the scratch off that is $1,000 prize. Are you gonna go ahead and buy that one, or does your eye immediately get drawn to the one that has a larger number with extra zeros, which is $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million? And so certainly there is that bump when you get to those higher levels, and then also it gets people looking twice. And so some of these flyers, like with this $30,000 reward that was offered for the incident in my district, people are a lot more receptive to even having it up in their businesses and their stuff. They're like, oh wow, $30,000 reward, that's a serious reward. And so it just draws a lot more attention to it. And as Lieutenant Colonel Herzog said, they've seen an increase in tips the more it's marketed and the more eyes that get drawn to it. But I'll send you over I'll go back to my notes and I'll send you over some stuff.
Thank you, Councilman Schleifer. I have a very brief comment. We're looking at 300. We're typically trending over 300 plus murders. And what I'm trying to figure out is how are we offering $30,000 for, say, even half of these murders or something of that nature. I look forward to learning more about it. And Councilman Schleifer, I do thank you for being creative and bringing this to the committee.
Yeah, and can I just say one economical thing on that? And thank you for bringing it up because it totally slipped my mind. When you look at the economics and like return on investment on anything that we're considering, right now the rewards of $2,000 to $4,000. Let's just use the $4,000 number. Now there's a state match of any funds that come forward. So just if you look at this year, next year alone, we can go from $4,000 reward to a $10,000 reward with just $1,000. Like if we had this fund right now and this fund said, hey, we want every single reward to be a minimum of $10,000, we could accomplish that with $1,000, because if we add $1,000 onto the existing 4,000 and there's a state match, that 5,000 goes to 10,000. And so when you look at any given year, if the clearance rate, let's say right now hovers around 50%, if 150 cases went unsolved last year, let's say, at $1,000 a piece, you're talking about 150,000, and that's if every single case got cleared. And trust me, if it cleared every case, we would have done this already. But it's not going to clear everyone. But the economics that we're talking about is really such a small amount, has such a great reward. And that $1,000, if we can get every tip that we get that can save the detective's time, also saves us money, because overtime is a very large expense. And when you have information and you know direction you're looking at, or you know a suspect that you should be looking into, or you know a description of a car or a description of a suspect that you didn't have before, that a tip gave you that information, that can save you many hours. And those hours alone can more than pay for the supplement that we'd be offering through this fund.
Thank you, Councilman Schleifer, and thank you, Chair Costello.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Councilman Burnett?
I don't have any further questions. I'll look for the data request that we submitted and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Vice President Middleton? She's throwing her hands up and her thumbs up, and it sounds like she's good. Struggling with that mute button. I've been there all week. Appreciate you, Council Vice President. Councilman Stokes.
It finally opened up. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam VP. Councilman Stokes.
Not a question. I think some of the concerns I have, Councilwoman McCray had already put those questions up and requested more information from the sponsor of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Dorsey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would like for Bob and Elena maybe to help clarify the finance department's statement that seems reasonable to me, that we already have the capacity to direct funds, don't necessarily need a special fund. I mean, isn't it the case that if we, as the city council gains the ability to direct funding in the annual ordinance of estimates, next year, that if the city council so chose, it could direct funds to this purpose, regardless of whether there's a special place for that money, special fund?
Bob, do you want to take first crack at that one, or?
Sure. Yes, that is true. But it would have to come from somewhere, because the ordinance that goes in, the charter amendment that goes into effect says that you can't change, the bottom line of the amount of revenue that the city projects to bring in. So you're right in that there would be the ability to move money, but it would have to come from another source.
I mean, isn't that what this special fund says anyway? It says, I mean,
well,
obviously the money's got to come from somewhere.
Well, I think yes, in a way, what the original bill was saying was that if this fund was set up, that follow-on legislation would allow the council to dedicate a fine or fee or other revenue source to make an additional contribution into the fund, which presumably would go through to the Metro Crime Stoppers program anyway. So that was where we got hung up on it, was that, yeah, if you divert another revenue source, that's going to come from somewhere, and then it causes hardship in another part of the budget. So, but yes, when the council has that authority, they'll be able to move more money to a program like this if it's in the budget. But like I said, it has to come from somewhere. And with a dedicated fund, if you have the language from the original bill in there, you would give the council the authority to set up either a new revenue source or to dedicate a current revenue source for this purpose, which then opens up a hole somewhere else in the budget, which is been our reason for our opposition for the special funds all along, pretty consistently for all of them, is that it just makes it just opens up a hole somewhere else in the budget.
I think another important consideration, and Bob may have said this in a different way, but that at least when the new appropriation law is charter amendment goes into effect, that'll be happening during the budget process. So whatever happens, it's there, it's in the budget, and it won't be surprising us down the road when it gets diverted from an already appropriated use.
Okay. But in general, it sounds like this is, especially once we have the ability to move money in the budget, there's not really any question that we have a pretty clear capacity to direct money to this purpose, even without the creation of a special fund.
I think the charter amendment for the increased power for the council does say that you have to have a source of funds for whatever you're doing. So you'd have to show that you're taking it from somewhere else and putting it into that purpose. So that all has to be in line as well.
Yeah, I guess that's understood. Thank you.
Councilman, you good? Dorsey?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess I'm also just looking forward to whatever supporting data there might be.
Okay, I'm going to
Thank
turn
you.
it back over to, thank you, Councilman Dorsey. I'm going to turn it back over to Councilman Schleifer before we go into recess on this one.
Well, I think there's, I mean, a few people have texted me they've had to leave by now, but I think there might be a couple people want to testify. If we can listen to just a little bit.
Absolutely, my apologies, and thank you for the reminder, Councilman.
Yeah, and I have a couple people who texted me, like Metro Crime Stoppers, which I forwarded you their letter of support, and they also apologized that they couldn't stay on the hearing. And also Larry Young also wanted to testify, but he's also sending in support. So if we can just go to the people who are on the calls before I, just give a conclusion.
Yep, absolutely. Marguerite, do you open up public testimony?
Mr. Chair, I sent out a message to all the attendees about 10 minutes ago to ask them to use the raise hand function or to send me a chat if they wanted to testify, and I didn't get any answers. So how do you want me to proceed?
Let's start with the raised hand function, and then we'll go to callers.
No raised hands and no call-in users.
Councilman Schleifer, you want to double check with any of your folks that are on the line, or if they're on the line?
Yeah, I had I have a few people who said they were calling in. They're having somebody from each organization wanted to send a representative. They've also sent written testimony. I don't know if I see there's a lot of exclamation marks next to some of the names on the attendee list. So I assume that's a
So Councilman, so
we could save it we can save that for the next hearing if
so hang on, Councilman, do you want to check with your folks to ensure they're still online, or do you want to wait until the next hearing? It's your call.
Either way, I think that I think the best course of action would probably be to get this amendment worked out, and at the follow-up hearing, have come with a little bit more, hear from some of the families of victims whose cases have still been unsolved, and then take it from there. And I've let them know that we're going to have a follow-up hearing also. So those who had conflicts or could only stay on a short period of time, I told them that it's fine, that we'll send them a new date and time.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
There are only about 6 or 7 attendees on here. I can go down that list at this time if you would like.
Sure. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Councilman, are you okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine. I think I see it just went down, but some of those names on there are employees, but you can staff
Okay.
members of different council people. You can go ahead if you'd like.
Okay, what about Ashley Henry? Is she here an employee? I know Chris is. We'll start with this one. You're identified as D on the attendees list. Do you have anything you would like to say? Hello? Miss Sullivan? Emily Sullivan, would you like to testify? Kimmy Saucer, would you like to testify?
She's one of my staff members.
Okay, what about Nadia? Okay. Nadia, last name O-W-U-S-U, would you like to testify?
No, thank you.
Okay. Miss Thomas, Shamar Thomas?
So what
I
happens
think
is,
that-
like, and it's essentially the legislation of
Shamar Thomas, would you like to testify?
living in
Okay, that's it. That concludes public testimony.
Okay, so what we'll do, Councilman, please work with Department of Law as well as Mayor's Office of Government Relations and Nikki from Council President's Office. We will plan on reconvening a hearing sometime approximately 4 to 5 weeks from now. And if you want to line up your folks that would like to testify, what we can do in terms of the order of that hearing is we can entertain the amendment first, and then we can jump right into public testimony. And then we'll go from there. So with that, Councilman, I'll turn it back over to you for closing remarks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And there's also been some letters of support that have been added to the bill file for anybody who'd like to read some of the details in those. But thank you, everyone, for hearing this bill today. If anybody has any amendments or any ideas, I'm wide open. I think the intention of the bill is pretty clear. I think that this speaks to a lot of the work that we all do on the council, finding creative solutions to addressing problems we have. One thing I will point out that this is a very low cost solution to a very big problem. And so we're really talking about peanuts in the grand scheme of things. And there's a lot of external partners out there, foundations and other organizations that would love to support such a cause. But as we've heard and discussed on many other funds and other bills, whether it be affordable housing, whether it be what we've heard about the youth fund, whether we've heard about any other things in the city, is that we want things that are going to be long-term, not something that's just 1 year and one budget, things that are really speaking to issues long-term and have that dedicated fund to do just that. And so this would probably be one of the smallest funds in the city because it's a very low-cost solution, but it's one that I feel very strongly that we should have this long-term solution, that every single case in Baltimore City should have that priority. And we can't get that same bang for our buck by simply making donations to an organization that operates all across the state when we can designate a fund that speaks to exactly the issues that we're having in the city. And I appreciate the administration's efforts that they're doing, also offering rewards for I guess illegal guns. And this is really just to build on that, and that could also be incorporated into this fund. And so I thank you all for the time, and anybody who has any questions or wants to discuss it further, my phone's always on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We're going to go into recess on this one. Committee members, is there a motion to
Mr. Chair.
reconsider? Yeah.
I'm sorry, this is
Councilman.
Councilman. So, did y'all vote on something I missed? That's what I was.
I got you, Councilman. I'm getting there right now.
All right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for the reminder. Colleagues, give me 2 seconds here because I got Marguerite. What was the previous bill number?
Bill 210091, sale of property, block 6997, lot 002.
Is there a motion to reconsider the bill that Marguerite just named?
So moved. Second.
So moved.
Motion by Stokes, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Burnett and Middleton at the same exact time. All those in favor of reconsidering?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'm sorry, point of order.
Yes.
I actually believe that the rules of order say that only the person on the prevailing side of a vote may call a motion to reconsider. And as Councilman Stokes
Yep, I got you,
was
I
not
got you.
voting. Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
no, that's a good point, Councilman Dorsey. All right, let's scrap everything we just did. First, I'm gonna call Council Bill 21-0091 back to order. Marguerite, did I say the right bill number?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Council Burnett, would you like to make a motion to reconsider this bill?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair, for
Thank you,
reconsideration.
Councilman Burnett. Councilwoman McCray, would you like to second that motion?
Second.
All those in favor of reconsidering this bill, we'll do a roll call. Costello is a yes. Burnett,
Yes.
McCray,
Yes.
Schleifer,
Yes.
Dorsey.
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey, do we take votes for Middleton and Stokes on the reconsider?
I think that they can vote to reconsider. I just think that they can't make the motion to.
Yes.
CVP Middleton,
Yes.
CM Stokes?
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion to move the bill favorably from Councilman Burnett?
Move the bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Is there a second from Councilwoman McCray?
Second.
Thank you, Councilwoman McCray. We'll do roll call just to be safe. Costello, yes. Burnett,
Yes.
McCray,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
Schleifer,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Dorsey, Dorsey,
Yes.
excellent. Prevented me from having to call, so we didn't have to go through this again. Excellent. Thank you, Councilman Dorsey, and thank you for the clarification on that. This bill passes 7-0. It moves to second reader at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council. We are now in recess. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.